You ever stand on your porch watching your wife leave with another man, knowing full well she's not coming back the same?
Yeah.
That was me. My daughter stood right next to me, and neither of us said a word. We didn't have to. We both knew. My wife wasn't going on a business trip. She was going on a betrayal vacation with her boss. That morning felt like something out of a movie. Not a good one, either. My daughter Emily and I stood outside our house, watching my wife Brenda load her last suitcase into the back of her boss's car. The guy, Ryan, gave me this smug little grin like he knew something I didn't. But I knew everything. He thought he was being slick, thought he'd pulled one over on me. I bit my tongue so hard I almost tasted blood. Emily stood in front of me, blocking my path to the steps like she knew I was one twitch away from doing something dumb. Smart kid. Brenda had this whole thing mapped out. Said they were flying to New York for some high-profile legal meetings. First big session was Monday morning, so they had to fly out Sunday evening. But what she never expected was that I'd gotten a phone call earlier that week. From Lisa, Ryan's wife. Lisa had details, flight times, hotel info, even told me they were connecting through St. Louis and booked under the same room. Not 2 rooms. Not even adjacent ones. 1. Brenda had been working at that firm for 6 years. 2 years ago, they made her an associate partner and it changed everything. She started acting different, colder, busier, less interested in family dinners and more into late nights and weekend case reviews with Ryan. I used to think it was the job pressure. Now I know better. Lisa had been through this before. Ryan had a history of getting too close to the women he supervised. Brenda either didn't know or didn't want to believe it. I used to think her legal brain would spot a manipulator from a mile away. Turns out she was either blind or chose to wear blinders. As Ryan's car pulled away, I kept my hands clenched and my mouth shut. Emily and I waved. Fake smiles. Brenda didn't even notice. She was already mentally in New York, or wherever they planned to kick off their little getaway. Inside, Emily asked me point-blank, "Do you think Mom has any idea what we know?" I shook my head. Nope. She still thinks this is all behind the curtain. We sat down, talked about it. Emily, just 18, was handling it better than I ever expected. She was mad, yeah, but she was also calm, grounded. She asked why I didn't stop Brenda. I told her the truth. If I confronted her, she'd have flipped the script, called me jealous, immature, maybe even paranoid. She would have gone anyway, I said, and she'd have gone mad at me first. Emily nodded. She understood. She saw what I saw. Brenda was too far gone. The old Brenda, the one I married after high school and worked my butt off to put through law school, she left the building a long time ago. Lisa had already hired a lawyer. Said she had all the documents ready. If they caught Ryan and Brenda together, Brenda would be served with interference of marriage, and Ryan with full-blown adultery papers. Lisa wasn't messing around. Her kids were grown, she had her life in order, and she was done playing second place to another one of Ryan's office flings. Once the car was gone, Emily and I went back inside. We didn't say much for a while, just sat in the quiet. The silence said everything. She turned to me and said, "Will you forgive Mom?" I didn't hesitate. Not this time. I'd forgiven her once before. Emily didn't know that, at least not until that moment. She stared at me, shocked, as I told her about the first time Brenda crossed the line. It was nearly 2 decades ago, before Emily was born. I suspected something back then, but kept it to myself until a DNA test confirmed Emily was mine. "The other guy?" I said. "You know him. We all do. You call him Uncle Paul." Emily's jaw dropped. She started connecting the dots. The family events I never attended when Paul was around. The way Brenda would always take the kids and I'd stay home. The split Christmases. It all made sense now. I made a joke. Sarcastic, bitter. "Maybe you should text your uncle. Let him know Brenda's back on the market." Emily didn't laugh. She just stared at me. I think it hit her right then, how deep this cut really went. How much of our family had been a cover story. I went to the kitchen, poured a cup of coffee, opened the local paper and started browsing for rentals. Brenda would get the house until Emily graduated. That's how the courts usually ruled. especially under Judge Harris. I wasn't going to wait around. I needed to be gone before she got back. And that, right there, was the start of everything changing. I never thought I'd speak to my brother Paul again. He crossed a line I couldn't forgive. But when my daughter called him without asking me, everything I buried for nearly 2 decades came crashing back. And somehow, it didn't go the way I thought it would. Emily didn't say much when I told her about Brenda and Paul. She just stared at the floor for a while. Then she picked up her phone, walked out of the room, and made a call. I could hear her voice through the kitchen wall. Quiet, firm, deliberate. A few minutes later, she came back in and said, "Dad, Uncle Paul wants to see you." He said, "He owes you." I should have been angry. Instead, I felt something I hadn't in a while, curious. I poured myself a strong drink and told Emily, "I'm going out. If I don't come home tonight, just get the car back. I'll call when I'm sober." I didn't need to say where I was going. She already knew. Our old fishing spot sat behind my dad's property. Paul was already there, sitting on a log, bottle of bourbon between his feet. I parked, walked over, and sat down without a word. We passed the bottle back and forth. No shouting, no punches, just silence until he broke it. "I was stupid," he said. "I knew what I was doing was wrong, but I did it anyway. And when you cut me off, I deserved it." I nodded. "You were dead to me." "I know," he said. He told me everything. How it started. How it ended. How he lived with the guilt every time he saw our parents. How Christmas always felt split in half because he knew he'd torn something apart that never really healed. For years, I saw it all through my own anger. But sitting there, hearing him admit everything, hearing him own it, something shifted. Maybe it was the alcohol. Maybe it was just time. Either way, I didn't hate him anymore. By the time we were both good and drunk, our dad showed up, shotgun in hand. He thought local teens were messing around. When he saw us, he just shook his head and muttered, "Idiots." He dragged us back to the farmhouse like we were still 12. Mom was waiting in the kitchen with her cast iron skillet, cooking eggs and potatoes to sober us up. Felt like time travel. While we ate, Mom called Emily and Paul's wife, Sarah. They showed up just as we were starting to feel human again. Sarah looked confused, seeing us together for the first time since she married into the family. She sat down and said, "Okay, what's going on? You two haven't spoken in 18 years. Paul didn't hesitate. "Because I slept with Brenda while she was pregnant with Emily. It was my fault." I watched my dad's face turn from confusion to rage. "I would have killed you," he said to Paul. "Clint had every reason to," Paul replied. Then Mom turned to me. "Why now?" I took a deep breath. "Because Brenda just flew off with her boss. Same story, different man. Only this time there's proof. Videos, lawyers, lawsuits." That's when Emily finally understood the whole picture. It wasn't just one mistake her mother made. It was a pattern, a habit. And we'd just been too blind or too forgiving to admit it before. Later that night, Emily and I made a decision. We'd move in with my parents temporarily. All we needed were our clothes and the things that mattered. The rest could stay behind. Brenda would be home to an empty house. "Where you go, I go," Emily said. "We do this together." That's when I realized something. I hadn't lost everything. In fact, I still had something more solid than anything Brenda ever gave me. My daughter's loyalty. Back at the house, Emily gave her mom one last shot. She left a short note on the kitchen table. "Since you made your choice, we've made ours. Michael can help you carry the rest of your baggage." We blocked Brenda's number that night. The next few days were weirdly calm. Brenda kept calling, leaving messages like everything was fine, trying to act like this was just another work trip. She had no idea we were already gone, and we weren't coming back. Then Lisa called me. She wanted to meet. We picked a roadhouse halfway between us. When I walked in, she was already there, dressed nice but simple. Blonde hair, calm eyes, and a quiet strength that I wasn't expecting. She didn't look broken. She looked ready. I sat down and introduced myself. She smiled, shook my hand, and said, "I'm glad you came." She wasn't just beautiful. She was composed, graceful. She carried herself like a woman who'd been through the fire and came out sharper, not softer. We talked about the trip, about what Brenda and Ryan had been doing, about how long it had likely been going on. She had kids. I had kids. Our lives were messy, overlapping in the worst ways, but somehow, sitting there, it didn't feel like a mess. It felt like clarity. Before we left, we danced a few slow songs in the bar next door. No big deal. Nothing romantic. Just two people leaning on each other a little bit to stay upright. I drove home that night feeling okay. When Emily saw me walk in, she raised an eyebrow and said, "Dad has a girlfriend now?" I rolled my eyes. "Don't start." She just smirked. Too late. She thought she was untouchable, that if she kept it hidden, it didn't count. But when hotel security let the investigator into their room and the lawsuits were dropped on them while they were still under the sheets, reality finally caught up with her. And my daughter? She saw everything. The call came in at 1 in the morning. I was deep asleep when the phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was Lisa. "They got them," she said. Hotel security gave clearance. Cameras were rolling. They were still asleep when it happened. I got out of bed, pulled on a pair of sweats, and went downstairs to make some tea. Mom came in a few minutes later, still in her nightgown, and asked, "Is the water still hot?" "Yeah," I said, and handed her a cup. "Look at this." I turned my phone around and hit play. The video wasn't grainy or blurry. It was crystal clear. Brenda and Ryan both in bed, half asleep, confused, then panic, then anger. They were served right there in the room. My mom watched silently. When it ended, she slid the phone back across the table and said, "We're done with Brenda." She wasn't being cruel. She was being clear. Sometimes a clean break is the only option. That night, Emily and I blocked Brenda's number. Not just on our phones, but on our house line too. I gave the front desk at work a heads up. If she called, I didn't want to hear about it. The next morning, the receptionist at the nursing home came to my office. "She's calling every 20 minutes, she said. "How can we stop this?" I texted her the video, told her, "Next time Brenda calls, ask for her number. If she gives it, send her this. And tell her we got it last night." That did the trick. The calls stopped. That afternoon, Lisa and I met up again. This time it was dinner. Nothing fancy, just a low-key spot where we could sit and talk. She looked better than the first time. Lighter, like the weight was finally starting to lift. We talked about the fallout, what the lawyers were doing, what our kids knew. Then she asked me, "How are you really handling this?" "Better than last time," I said. Because this time she chose it. This wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. Lisa nodded. "Yeah, it's different when they plan it. Makes you question everything." I told her about Paul, about how I hadn't spoken to my brother in 18 years, about the DNA test, about the moment I found out that Emily was actually mine, and not his. "You forgave him?" she asked. I did. Eventually. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled and said, "That must have taken strength." I shrugged. Took whiskey. And time. After dinner, we danced again. Just one song. Just enough to make me forget, for a minute, that everything around us was on fire. The next day, while I was making lunch with my mom, Emily walked in and said, "Dad, you got a text. It's from a number I don't recognize." It was Brenda, or more likely Ryan's phone. "Want me to answer it?" Emily asked. I shook my head. Let it die. We kept the phones off for the night. We knew the boys, Nathan and Adam, would try to call, but we weren't ready to explain everything yet. They ended up showing up at the house, only to find it half empty. My favorite chair? Gone. Emily's makeup table? Packed. In the kitchen, they found Emily's note. Apparently, it freaked them out. They called Brenda in a panic, but she played dumb. Said she didn't know why we left. She probably thought if she stayed vague, she could still spin the story. But the real twist came when they called Uncle Paul, of all people. And Paul told them the truth. "Ryan is your mom's boss. They've been sharing a hotel room in New York for over a week. Draw your own conclusions." that hit them like a freight train. They spent the next 24 hours spreading the news better than gossip ever could. By the time I walked into work on Monday, my secretary had already forwarded a message from Nathan. "Dad, where are you? What's going on?" I texted back, "Check your messages." A few minutes later, his reply came in, "Damn. I'll be at Grandpa's by 8. We sat down that evening, me, Emily, my sons, and had the first real conversation in years. They wanted answers. I gave them facts. No fluff. No sugarcoating. Emily was furious. "You think this was some kind of mistake? A one-time thing?" she said. "The room was booked under Mr. and Mrs. Ryan. A week in advance. They tried to play it down. Everyone makes mistakes, Dad." Emily snapped. "This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. They planned this. They wanted to get away with it." Then I dropped the other bomb. "I'm getting tested. For everything." They all went quiet. "Because I can't say for sure that Ryan's the only one," I said. "And neither can any of you." When I told my kids I was getting tested, they thought I was overreacting. But when the results came in, there was no more denying it. This wasn't just about betrayal. This was about danger. And my ex-wife had brought that right into our home. The test wasn't hard to take. What was hard was telling our family doctor why I wanted it. He'd known us for over 20 years. Watched my kids grow up. Seen Brenda and me at every checkup like clockwork. When I explained what had happened, what she had done, he sat there quietly for a long minute. "You're doing the right thing," he finally said. "Better safe than sorry." A few days later, I got the call. "Mark," he said, "it's minor, but you tested positive. We'll need you to come in for treatment, and it has to be reported to the county." I didn't say anything for a few seconds. I just stared out the window at nothing. "So," I said, "now it's official. Brenda hadn't just broken our marriage. She'd risked my health." The county health department contacted her almost immediately. She'd have to come in for a checkup and list all her recent partners. Knowing Brenda, that was going to be a painful conversation, but I didn't care anymore. That night I told Emily. Then I told Nathan and Adam. They were stunned. "There's no way," Jason said. "Mom wouldn't." "She did." I cut in. "And it wasn't from Ryan." I watched their expressions shift as they tried to process that. "Do you think this was the only time?" Adam asked quietly. "I think this was just the first time she got caught," I said. That shut down the conversation. I needed space, so I went outside to call Lisa, told her what happened. She was silent for a bit, then said, "You know what hurts most? He didn't even care enough to hide it well. He thought he was untouchable," I said. "So did Brenda." We talked about her daughters, Mia and Sophie. They were young, 8 and 10, but smart, observant. Lisa said they were starting to ask questions about why their dad hadn't come to visit. I offered to pick them all up that weekend, take them somewhere fun, give them a distraction. That Saturday, we went to a local fair. Rides, greasy food, cheap games, the works. Mia was a little shy at first, but Sophie was bold. She climbed up on my shoulders like we'd known each other forever. Felt good. Real. Like I was allowed to breathe again. Later, while we were waiting in line for food, we ran into Paul and his wife Sarah. They were there with their kids too. The introductions were quick, but warm. Mary and Lisa hit it off immediately. Then something happened that caught me off guard. "Are you Mom's boyfriend?" Mia asked, dead serious. I laughed. "I'm her friend. A guy who happens to like being around her." "Did you ask her on a date?" Sophie jumped in. "Not yet," I said. "But if I do, I'll need permission." "From who?" they both asked. "From you." They thought that was the funniest thing in the world. Lisa came back to find us all laughing. She gave me a look like, "What did you say?" I just smiled and shrugged. Later that evening, after dropping them off, I stood on Lisa's front step getting ready to leave. The girls were already inside, running around in pajamas. "Thanks for today," she said. I started to say something about how it wasn't a big deal, but before I could, she kissed me on the cheek. "Come back here," she said quietly. I turned. She leaned in and kissed me again, on the lips this time. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to say we're not just pretending anymore. We sat on her front porch after that like a couple of teenagers just talking. About our kids, our fears, our past, our hopes. Neither of us said the word relationship, but it was hanging in the air between us. When I got home, Emily was already waiting in the living room. "You look like someone who just had a good night," she said. "Not everything is about romance, you know," I replied. She raised her eyebrow. "Did you kiss her?" I didn't answer. "That's a yes," she said and smiled. "Took you long enough." Sunday morning, my mom made a massive breakfast. Emily and I sat at the table like nothing had changed, but everything had. I had tea in my hand and something close to peace in my chest. Then came the next blow. Brenda was back. She walked into an empty house. No kids. No husband. No notes, except one from Emily. "Hope Michael has space on his couch. Looks like you'll need it." She called the boys, frantic. They had no answers for her. She called the receptionist at my job, who sent her the video clip from the hotel room. That was the last time Brenda tried to contact us directly. Brenda thought she could ride it out, that I'd cool off, that we'd talk like before. But this time, the consequences weren't just private, they were on TV. The same night she walked back into our empty house, the lawsuits hit the evening news, and her name was right there in the headlines. Monday morning, my lawyer Rachel Cohen called. She was fired up. "The video evidence you sent me?" she said. "It's gold. But I've got more. We're going after the firm." Rachel used to work at the same company, Westlake and Barnes LLP. She had the old HR manual and knew exactly where the ethical tripwires were buried. Turns out there was a clause specifically about relationships between senior and junior partners. By Tuesday, she'd filed for $10 million in damages, naming both Ryan and Brenda. She also made it clear, if they tried to downplay the situation, she'd name other women Ryan had been involved with. And Lisa, she had a certified list. 5 names, 5 statements, and 5 husbands ready to testify. It was going to get ugly, fast. Brenda had no idea. She was still trying to call me, still trying to spin a story that I'd somehow overreacted. Then she got served again, this time by a process server right at the airport, the moment she stepped off her connecting flight. The same moment, actually, that my doctor called. "Mark," he said, "you're clean now. You responded well to treatment. But your wife has to come in. She's listed as a contact." I asked him if that notice went to the health department. "Yes," he said. "By law, we had to notify them." So Brenda didn't just get hit by a personal betrayal. She got pulled into a full-scale public health investigation. That same evening, the lawsuits went public. Our town's 6 p.m. news segment opened with, "Local law firm Westlake and Barnes faces a multi-million-dollar lawsuit after a senior partner was caught in an alleged relationship with a subordinate during a company-funded trip to New York." Then they dropped the names. Brenda's face on the screen. Ryan's too. By 6:15, my phone was blowing up. Friends, neighbors, even old co-workers I hadn't talked to in years. Lisa texted, "You okay?" I replied, "Better than expected. But this is only the beginning." Emily and I sat together watching the news replay, and for once, she didn't have anything sarcastic to say. She just looked at me and nodded. Like, yeah, this was the right call. By Thursday, Ryan and Brenda were effectively blacklisted. The firm's senior partners weren't defending them publicly. They were more concerned with damage control. Quiet meetings, internal memos, an emergency PR firm was brought in. Meanwhile, Lisa and I kept things steady. We went out a few times, nothing dramatic, just dinners, walks, time with her daughters. Mia and Sophie started calling me Mr. Mark without being asked. Then one night, we had them over at my parents' farmhouse for dinner. After dessert, Lisa's younger daughter Sophie climbed up into my lap and said, "Mom says you're her best friend. Is that right?" I asked. "She also said she likes you," Mia added from across the table. Lisa turned bright red. Emily nearly dropped her fork from laughing. My dad? He just raised his glass and said, "Well, it's about time." After dinner, Lisa and I stepped out onto the porch. The air was cool. calm. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could take a full breath. Then she turned to me and said, "Can I ask you something kind of serious?" "Of course. If this ends up being more than just helping each other through the mess, would that be okay with you?" I didn't hesitate. "Yeah, it would." She reached for my hand, just held it. That was all. The next day, Rachel called again. This time she was smiling. "Westlake and Barnes wants to settle. Out of court. Their insurance company wants to make this go away fast." "How much are they offering?" "More than we expected. Enough for each of you to walk away with $750,000 after legal fees." It didn't feel like a win. Felt like a conclusion. Not justice, but closure. That same night, my mom invited Lisa's parents over for dinner. I didn't even know about it until I walked in the door and saw her dad sitting at the table. We talked. We laughed. And somewhere in the middle of dessert, I looked at Lisa, looked at her girls, and I knew I wasn't patching up my old life. I was starting a new one. Before I proposed to Lisa, I didn't go to her first. I went to her daughters. Because after everything I'd been through, I knew what mattered. And if we were going to become a real family, I needed their blessing first. The day I decided to propose, I didn't even tell my daughter. I waited until I picked Mia and Sophie up from school. They ran out of the building with those wide, end-of-the-day grins, backpacks bouncing behind them. I let them talk for a while about snacks, about gym class, about how one of their classmates got stuck in a chair again. Then, once we were in the car, I said, "Hey girls, can I ask you something important?" They both turned toward me, dead serious. "What would you think if I asked your mom to marry me?" Mia was quiet, but Sophie jumped right in. "You have to." I laughed. "Well, I want to, but only if it's okay with you too." Mia smiled. "We already call you Mr. Mark. If you marry Mom, can we call you Dad?" That hit me harder than I expected. I pulled into the driveway and sat there a moment longer before saying, "You can call me anything you want, but yeah, I'd be honored." That night, after dinner at my parents' place, I stood up, pushed my chair back, and dropped to one knee. Lisa's eyes went wide. The girls started whispering and bouncing in their seats. "Lisa," I said, "will you take a second chance on life with me? Will you marry me?" She looked stunned, then tearful, then smiling. "Yes," she said. "Absolutely yes." The whole room lit up. Even my dad cracked open a bottle of his hidden stash. And just like that, the pain of the last few months didn't disappear, but it finally had somewhere to go. Somewhere good. Later that night, Lisa asked me something that had been on her mind since day one. "What about the girls' last names?" I nodded. "I've already been thinking about that." A week later, I showed up at Ryan's new office. He'd moved to another city, opened a firm, and tried to act like none of this had happened. But when I walked in, he knew. He looked up from his desk and froze. "I need you to sign something," I said. "Permission for me to adopt Mia and Sophie." "Why would I do that?" "Because they asked. Because they want to carry my last name. And because if you say no, I'll be around a lot more often." That got his attention. He stared at the paper, then back at me, and without another word, he signed. I thanked him and left. Lisa was at school when I dropped it off. She came down to the office when the secretary called her. I handed her the envelope, and when she opened it, her hands shook. "How?" she asked. "He still thinks I'm the one who got him punched in the face." I used that. Lisa wiped her eyes, laughed through the tears, and said, "You are seriously dangerous when you're quiet." I smiled. "It's my superpower." We filed the paperwork with Rachel's help. A week later, it was official. Mia and Sophie became Mia and Sophie Walker. The next family meeting happened the following weekend. Lisa and I told everyone the adoption had gone through and that we'd scheduled the wedding for the Saturday before Christmas. A simple backyard ceremony in the old equipment shed, cleaned out and decorated by family. At the announcement, little Sophie ran up to me, hugged my leg, and said, "Thank you, Dad." I couldn't even answer. That moment was everything. The day I married Lisa, it wasn't just about the two of us. It was about the four of us. And when I looked down during the ceremony and saw Mia and Sophie holding hands with my daughter Emily, I realized I didn't just rebuild my life. I built something better than what I lost. The wedding was simple. The old shed behind my parents' farmhouse was cleaned out, decorated with lights, and turned into something magical with just a few tables, some folding chairs, and the right people in the room. The night before, Emily helped Lisa's daughters pick out their shoes. They were so excited, they couldn't stop twirling in their little dresses. Lisa's parents were in town, and so were my sons, Nathan and Adam. Even Paul and Sarah came early to help hang lights. The ceremony was short, real. I wore my dad's old suit, slightly altered. Lisa wore a soft cream dress. No veil, no drama, just truth. We said our vows in front of everyone who mattered. And when the officiant asked if I took Lisa to be my wife, I looked at her, then at her daughters and said, yes, all three of them. The room broke into laughter, then applause, then tears. Afterward, we shared a meal and danced in the grass while the kids chased each other around the backyard. My mom cried 3 separate times. My dad gave me a quiet pat on the back and said, "You did good, son." At the very end of the night, Lisa and I sat on the farmhouse porch, just the two of us. "Feels different this time," she said. "Because we earned it," I said. She nodded and leaned into me. Across the yard, I saw Emily teaching Sophie how to roast a marshmallow. Mia was sitting in Sarah's lap, already half asleep. Felt like peace. Not the kind that's quiet, but the kind you fight for and finally get to keep. Brenda didn't show up. We didn't expect her to. The divorce was final. Her name was no longer tied to mine. The lawsuit had been settled. Publicly. Cleanly. And yet, I still heard things. Ryan's new firm had already lost a few major clients. Word got around. Some of the old partners were quietly pushing him out. Brenda tried to rebuild her reputation, but the public nature of everything, plus the confirmed health issues, had changed her standing for good. Nathan told me she still cried a lot, that she'd been trying to reach out. But I didn't respond. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. Emily once asked me if I'd ever talk to her again. "Maybe," I said, "but not today. And not because she wants it. Only if the time is right." Lisa and I took our daughters to Disneyland the following summer. They called it their honeymoon. They even insisted on getting matching t-shirts that said, "Walker Family Adventure." Emily came too. She said she wanted to chaperone the adults. Classic her. One night, while the girls were asleep in the hotel and Lisa was brushing her hair in the bathroom, Emily sat next to me on the bed. "You look happy, Dad." "I am." "You deserve it," she said. "I'm glad you didn't give up on love." I nodded, then asked, "Do you think your brothers will come around?" "They already have," she said. "They're just slower." I smiled. "They get that from their mom." Emily laughed so hard she had to cover her face with a pillow. And that was the moment I knew for sure I'd made it through. Not perfect, not untouched, but whole. Not just a man who survived betrayal, but a father who gained 2 more daughters. Not just someone who rebuilt his life, but someone who finally got the one he should have had all along.